In order to make the article less boring, more flexible, and to avoid being replaced by asterisks, there will be some nicknames. English, John, Charlie France, Francis, Jacob Prussia, Hohenzollern, Hans. Hans was originally a German pronoun. This article refers specifically to Prussia in the 19th and 20th centuries. Austria, Habsburg, Ludwig, the Austrian Empire pronoun borrowed by Ludwig for the demon monk. Russia, Romanov, Ivan, Nevsky, Lucia. Spain, Fernandez. America, Tom, Sam. Italy, Anthony. Japan, Neon Da, the transliteration of Japan in Japanese Kostan, it refers to this country. Turkey, Zaid Pasha. Zaid means nobility, and Pasha means high officials, both derived from Persian. Turkey in this article mainly refers to the Ottoman Empire. Sad Pasha is a compound word made up by demon monks to refer to Ottoman Turkey in the 19th and 20th centuries. I originally wanted to use Muhammad, and I understood it as soon as I heard it, but considering the possibility of crossing the line, I decided to abandon this more representative name. On behalf of the summary and explanation, Prussia, Austria, and Russia are the three fortresses of European conservatives. Historically, they established the Holy Alliance to contain the Republican France, and later established the Three Emperors Alliance to continue to stare at France. The demon monks also used their dynasty or royal family to refer to their empire, so in Prussia there was the code name of Hohenzollern, the code name of Habsburg appeared in Austria, and the code name of Romanov appeared in Russia. Because the Bourbon dynasty, the Orleans dynasty, and the Bonaparte dynasty of the Napoleon family appeared in France, it is difficult to choose which of the three dynasties to refer to France. Another point is that France is often a republic, so no dynasty is used to refer to it. Because the ruling dynasty of England was the Hanoverian dynasty, the Elector from Hanover ruled the British Empire. However, there will be confusion with the German Hanover area name, so Hanover is not used to refer to English. In this article, the characters appear directly, and they appear in the stories told, and they are more extensive and important characters. Some lived after 1840 and appeared directly in the text, indicated by brackets, straight. Napoleon, the mother and the fetus were against France, the fool who was fooled by the old Corsicans, and the bad seed bullied by the French mainlanders. Later, they realized that Corsica's independence was nothing to do, so they did not rebel against France, but became a part of France. In the process of supporting France, he has grown into an extraordinary military talent, an ordinary excellent administrative talent, and a sloppy political and diplomatic talent. Sensitivity, inferiority complex, self-esteem, pride, lack of compromise. Archduke Karl, straight the first 2, 3, 4, or 5 steamed buns, the first person to truly defeat Napoleon, the commander-in-chief of Austria and the chairman of the military commission, he not only defeated Napoleon, causing Napoleon to suffer heavy losses, but also broke the myth of Napoleon's invincibility, and was when Napoleon defeated, not a single hair was left, that is, the loss was very small. He is not like Napoleon, and he is the only opponent recognized by Napoleon. He also recognizes Napoleon very much. Otherwise, why do military reforms follow Napoleon? Military liberal, political conservative. Wellington, straight a small half of the 10th steamed bun, one of the protagonists of the Battle of Waterloo, the general of Indian soldiers in Napoleon's mouth and pen. It's not good to be beaten by Napoleon, and he is good at yin people and tricks his teammates. His fame is entirely blown by the British. Wellington suffers from Napoleon fear and nightmare syndrome. I have nightmares when I think of Napoleon, and there is Napoleon in every nightmare. Blücher, more than half of the 10th steamed bun, one of the protagonists of the Battle of Waterloo, the commander of Prussia, his military level is the strongest man in Prussia. He was once captured by the French army, and when he was old, he became nervous. Alexander I, the Russian emperor, cruel, tough, the most typical toughest person, is completely different from his father and grandmother. He is also a girl lover, and an inexplicable death of the Russian emperor. No one knows how he died. In the Franco-Russian War, he was the decision-maker of the policy of killing 800 enemies and losing 10,000. See chapters 39, 42, Emperor Franz, the Emperor of Austria, a straw bag in the mouth of his brothers and sisters, a person who Major General's ability but wants to be a general of the world in the mouth of an officer, a coward and an idiot in the eyes of the Queen. Loneliness, pain, cowardice, impulsiveness, patience, and strength are all kinds of emperors. The more the plot unfolds, the more different people communicate with him and the more evaluations, the more three-dimensional, fuller, and more complicated his image becomes. Maria Ludovica, the Queen of Austria, is also the cousin of the Austrian Emperor, Archduke Karl and Archduke John, as well as a fan sister and fan of Archduke Karl. Because the Principality of Modena, the mother country, was destroyed by Napoleon, it strongly opposed France and Napoleon. Superb administrative ability praised both internally and externally, politically conservative, has a story with Archduke Karl. See chapters 3344, Italy series, Archduke John, straight in the Habsburg family, the second largest military figure after Archduke Karl. He is politically enlightened, liberal, renounces royal privileges, greatly reduces the pension, and takes a commoner wife. See chapters 6073, Metternich, straight Austrian foreign minister, prime minister, the most powerful politician in the first half of the 19th century in Europe. See Li Hongzhang, Bismarck. Political conservative. Josephine, Napoleon's first queen, because of her beauty, went to the guillotine and survived. With high IQ and emotional intelligence, she managed Napoleon silently. See chapter 41, she was also the grandmother of Napoleon III. Mary Louise, straight the eldest princess of the Austrian Empire, the second empress of Napoleon. See chapters 40, 41, 46, called by Napoleon to marry a womb. She married an earl after Napoleon's defeat, and later married an earl. Jerky when you are young, but very wise when you are old. Kutuzov, the 6th, 7th, and 8th steamed buns, Marshal of the Russian Empire, cruel, tough, Commander-in-Chief of the Russian army in the Franco-Russian War, caused Napoleon to suffer heavy losses. The implementer of the policy of killing 800 enemies and losing 10,000. See chapter 42. This guy was the commander-in-chief who was considered second only to Napoleon, Archduke Karl, and Wellington at the time, and both he and Napoleon were artillery professionals. He is also a Russian military theorist and can be called Russia's military god. Prince Karl Philipp Schwarzenberg, the 9th Mantu, the commander-in-chief of the 7th Anti-French Alliance, succeeded Archduke Karl in charge of the Austrian military, and defeated Napoleon at the Battle of Leipzig. Austria is second only to Karl's second military commander. Of course, there is still a big gap between him and Karl. Maria Theresa, the Empress of the Holy Roman Empire, known as Teresa the Great, established the powerful position of the Holy Roman Empire. The equivalent of Catherine the Great of Russia and Victoria the Great of England. It was Archduke Karl, Archduke John, and the grandmother of the protagonist's grandfather Franz II. He fought against Prussia several times and was defeated by his cousin Frederick the Great of Prussia, but the more the war, the stronger he was, but he died a few years earlier than his cousin. No kill cousin. UU reading www.uugonshu.com. Frederick the Great, also known as Frederick the Great, he was the first powerful emperor who established the status of a powerful Prussian country. During his reign, he fooled his cousin, Empress Teresa, and asked her to cede Silesia to him, so she would admit her throne, and her cousin would not eat that. He brought troops to fight. It caused 2 European wars, the War of Austrian Succession, and the 7 Years' War, in which the whole of Europe was basically involved. Of course, in the end he captured Silesia, which he hadn't fooled. Well, this war madman, he is also a famous writer and a famous composer. Be cool. In addition to his native language, he can speak 5 languages proficiently, and he can speak 4 languages. Wanyan is still learning Russian, Basque, and Chinese. You are right, he has also learned Chinese. So it's normal that my cousin Teresa the Great can't fight this madman. This guy just wasn't born in the same era as Napoleon. He is also the military strongman considered by Europe to be second only to Napoleon and other 4 major powers. Well, he is tied for 5th, and Gustav II, the King of Sweden who was killed by Austria, is also 5th. Joseph II, son of Teresa the Great, consolidator of imperial strength, Germanist, conservative, implementation and promotion of Teresa's policies, Germanic immigration and colonization in Central Europe. It is the uncle of Archduke Karl, the uncle of the protagonist, Grandpa Karl. Leopold II, son of Empress Teresa, brother of Joseph II, before becoming emperor, he spent decades in Florence, deeply influenced by the Renaissance, liberalism and ideal king in the hearts of philosophers. Being the emperor for 2 years shortened the lifespan of the empire by at least 20 years. Archduke Karl's father, father of the protagonist Karl's grandfather. In this article, some place names are inconsistent with the current map. Due according, the front is the modern name, and the back is the name of the Austrian Empire. Some are not exactly the same. For example, Moravia includes parts of what is now the Czech Republic, Silesia also includes parts of what is now the Czech Republic, etc. Czech Republic, Bohemia, Slovakia, Moravia, Bratislava, Prespig, Lviv, Lemberg, Krakow, a city in the Galicia region, Rijeka, Fiume, Italian, Wrocław, Breslau, Cluj-Napoca, Krossenburg, German agglomeration in Transylvania, Brasov, Kronstadt, not in Russia, the famous Kronstadt on the edge of St. Petersburg, the gathering place of Germans in Transylvania, Sibiu Hermannstadt, a German settlement in Transylvania. Zrenjanin, Welki, Bekarek, Maribor, Marburg, Onderdra, Murska, Sobota, Olsnitz, Slovenia, Bis Tirika, Bis Tiritz, Ljubljana, Labak, Wiroatites, Timișoara, Temsburg, Panavobenstadt, across the Danube from Belgrade. Pucci, Lu Chongqing laughed out loud, squirting the water out of his mouth. This Karl Ludwig is really interesting. Compared with the famous 6 emperor pills in our Datang Empire, he is only a little worse. Karl's grandfather is the emperor, the uncle is the emperor, the eldest brother is the emperor, the second brother is the emperor, the grandson is the emperor, the nephew and son are the crown prince, and even seriously, Karl's father is also the crown prince. Because the uncle has no heirs, it should be Karl's father who takes over from the uncle's class as the emperor. But Karl's father has a good point, that is, he is very self-aware. He feels that his intelligence and energy are average, and he can't handle such a big empire. So he gave up the right of inheritance and supported his eldest son, Karl's eldest brother Franz Joseph, as the first in line to the throne, that is, the crown prince. Yes, Lu Chongqing is often referred to as a German club. He carefully manipulated Europe in the 19th and 20th centuries, especially German-related information, and he sighed with embarrassment when he saw the suffocation of Germany in the historical materials. Lu Chongqing also read online novels avidly. When he saw the authors worrying about the rise of Germany, such as the delicate and ingenious political and diplomatic design, he would also smile and give him a monthly ticket. He also often works with the authors, how to punch the tyrannical Big Ivan and how to kick the wilted Little John. A typical manifestation of the superficial German club is that he despises Austria and its variant, the Austro-Hungarian Empire. It doesn't matter if they think they are bad, and they often do a disservice to Germany's rise and some key wars. Not only can they not play a positive role, but they are sometimes a burden. If pig teammates were included in the dictionary, and the power to write the example sentences was handed over to these German sticks, they would definitely give Austria several lines of space. Lu Chongqing is a typical superficial German club. When he saw Karl Ludwig's stuff, he couldn't help laughing at him. Seeing that Lu Chongqing seems to have nothing to do, all day long with Germany, worrying about Prussia, you think he is a Diozzi, but he is not. He has a good family. He was an early $10,000 million household, and the group of people who got rich first, did it lead to wealth later? This, the demon monk really does not know. As for Liu Chongqing himself, whether it is the often mentioned IQ, EQ, or the ability to realize business awareness and business skills financial quotient FQ, he is good. In terms of reading, Liu Chongqing performed well, from the Central Primary School, Experimental Junior High School, Key High School, all the way to 985 University. The undergraduate degree is from Tongji University, the master degree is from the University of Munich, and the doctoral degree is from ETH Zurich. From this point of view, it is not too much to praise a scholar. Liu Chongqing returned to southern Germany after graduation. He first joined Mercedes-Benz, then Siemens a few years later, and then went to Switzerland, joined ABB, and returned to China as a senior executive. With such a degree and experience, Liu Chongqing's economy is also outstanding. The area of Financial Street, Fenghui Yuan Community, 188 square meters, where people and registered permanent residences are located, is within the second ring road, where every inch of land is expensive, an inch of time is still expensive, and it is expensive enough to buy a life. Anjuk, you can check the shells, how much is it worth? Below Yuanton Park, there are several large-sized apartments, which are charged monthly for apartments. That's right, it's the princess tomb, where Huanzh's little swallows are buried. As for her husband, the fifth elder brother Yangqi, he was buried in Yangaswang village, Bulaotun town, Mayun County, 100 kilometers away from her, but a little more. It can be seen that these two goods are not so affectionate. And Kayang Yao, you lied to us. In the middle school attached to Tianchaomen University, there is also a compact school district room. The household registration is for 2 children born to his ex-wife. As for the baby, she is resident in Xingjiapo. These were all created by Liu Chongqing's struggles, not imagined by the demon monk for him, so he is a proper elite. Liu Chongqing still has 200 million soft sister coins in cash, which was shared by his ex-wife when he divorced. His ex-wife is much more powerful than him. The couple is very strange. From marriage to divorce, they have been living apart in the imperial capital. Ladies and gentlemen, Liu Chongqing is good enough. However, there is no culture, no rich or poor, no smart or stupid. Since it has reached the level of stick, it is somewhat confusing. It is said that there are many elite universities that are tied for number 1 in a certain country. How can this make sense? Liu Chongqing is not reading novels now, he is spending a few weeks in Austria with his girlfriend. It is neither Japan, South Korea, Malaysia, and Thailand, nor Australia, New Zealand, and America, but the legendary leisure travel package specially created for senior elites in-depth tour of European boutique small countries. His girlfriend was a little uncomfortable. He was resting in the hotel, and Liu Chongqing came out alone. He walked around Vienna and casually walked to a church, where he saw Karl Ludwig's special confessional room. Karl was studying with the Archbishop of Vienna at that time. Because he was relatively stupid, he often failed to complete the schoolwork assigned by the bishop, and he regretted and blamed himself, so he became a frequent visitor to the confessional. It is said that he is a regular visitor to the point that others who want to use this confession room have to wait in line outside for him to come out, which affects the enthusiasm of others for confession. Think about it, you are waiting in line outside to repent, and you can't see the end of your repentance, and your repentance will fade away. Well, forget it, that's it, I don't seem to have done anything wrong, so I don't regret it. Then, go straight to the home. Karl Ludwig, historically said to be the stupidest of the 4 brothers of Joseph, as the core son of the Austrian royal family, he had no pursuits either politically or militarily. Of course, he did not show much. If you observe him, you will find that he is only praying daily, habitually repenting, and making intermittent pilgrimages, and he is always devoted to the Lord Jesus. The third brother, Karl, is very strange. He is not as conscientious as the eldest brother, worrying about his subjects. It's not like the second brother is so cranky, worrying about those subjects who don't take him as masters. It's not like the fourth brother is so obsessed and pursues the true meaning of love. It can be said that Karl's life is a life of ignorance, a life that can be born or not. However, the stupidest Karl Ludwig was the happiest of the four brothers. He was born into the most powerful royal family in continental Europe, the Habsburg family. When he was alive, although Austria encountered ups and downs, it was still prosperous on the whole. Karl is neither tired and depressed like the eldest brother, not stupid and dead like the second brother, nor dull and aggrieved like the fourth brother. Karl also often attends various important ceremonies. Well, it is the emperor's elder brother who replaces him. Looking at Karl's special confession room, Liu Chongqing suddenly had the idea of a prank, and he got into the confession room. As a man with great ability to calamity, although he is old and not confused, he really wants to give it up and wants to make a good confession. Confession is just for peace of mind, and I don't plan to correct it anyway. In the small secret room, Liu Chongqing laid out his various little things one by one, told God one by one, and repented carefully without leaving any dead ends. After repenting, he made a naughty conclusion: I was wrong, but I won't change it. As soon as the words in his heart are finished, he relaxes. It may also be because he has walked too much in the afternoon and is a little tired. Anyway, a feeling of exhaustion hits him, so he lies there and takes a nap. I don't know how long it took. It seemed that the lights were just starting to come on. It was half dark or not. It was unclear. Liu Chongqing was going to go out and go back to the hotel to have dinner with his girlfriend, and then, you know. He propped himself up, and with a clatter, he fell to the ground. Could it be that his legs were numb? When he looked up, he felt that the confessional room seemed to be much bigger. It was strange. Rubbing his eyes, Liu Chongqing realized that he had short legs and small arms. Before he could be surprised, he suddenly felt a headache and passed out. In a daze, a lot of information was squeezed into his mind, making Liu Chongqing dumbfounded. I don't know if God punished him, or favored him, and let him be reborn on Karl Ludwig, and on the young Karl as a child. It is January 31st, 1840, Vienna, and the weather is fine. The snow that fell a few days ago has not completely melted, the temperature is a little low, the fireplace is burning, and the smell of smoke drifts into the nostrils, coughing, and a little choking. Liu Chongqing, who possessed Karl Ludwig, was very distressed. In almost all historical data, Austria is not capable enough to help the Prussian-dominated Germany, and even drags it back, never having the high spirits that Germany should have. In almost all the novels, either Prussia annexed Austria and strengthened the power of Germany, or they used Austria to attract enemy firepower and developed their own wretchedness. No matter which method, the end result is that Germany under the Prussian rule became more powerful, waving and beating the Gallic rooster and stepping on Italy. I haven't seen any author who is willing to give Austria a chance to let the Habsburg family rise up and show their lower body to dominate Europe. Don't expect to annex Prussia like the common author Yaya, at least let him perform a serious performance on the stage. The voiceover criticized Liu Chongqing: young man, you are still reading less, we seem to have seen it. God, you reborn me on someone I never valued, well, no way, you called me reborn on someone I despised, and before the rebirth, I was making fun of him, and I still feel kind of embarrassing. Almighty God, what do you say? In my heart, the ambition of Great Prussia is to achieve dominance. How can it be realized? Tell me to rise up on the basis of Austria? God, big brother, I didn't think about it, I didn't prepare, I used to read books or Yaya in reverse. It's really hard to do. I can't live without eating and waiting to die. Anyway, I can live to be more than 60 years old. In the 19th century, although it was not particularly long, it was far beyond the average survival age of Europeans. But thinking of this Karl Ludwig, going to the Jordan River, drinking everyone's bath water, soaking in corpse water, and dying in such a weird way, it's not easy. Besides, I can't be an emperor again. If I can be an emperor, I can at least bully men and bully women, and hurt the gods and reason. It's cool and hardy. But Europe is not like the Tang dynasty and the Sui dynasty. People are lined up one by one. According to the steps of succession, I can't be the emperor. I remember that this cheap imperial brother lived in his 80s. At that time, the grass on my tomb had withered and prospered more than 20 times, and the trees on the tomb were as thick as two people hugging each other. What's even more unfortunate is that there are still 8 years before the 1848 revolution that swept across Europe. An ignorant young man encountered chaos. He was still a stupid little thing. What do you call him? Also, why did you call me Rebirth? I am a successful person, and my household registration has been moved from a small county town to the edge of the Forbidden City. In addition to living in a large house, there are also several large apartments for rent, which are all the envy of outsiders. I wake up smiling every morning, you know? God! Isn't it all about regenerating waste wood when I read it? Why did I change this rule? I am an elite, I belong to the 3 highs with high appearance, high education, and high income. Which of my points meets the requirements for rebirth? You say it, answer me. He really wanted to grab God's neck and questioned him, why did you call me born again? But he couldn't ask God by the neck, and of course no God could explain it to him. Is it because I confessed an unorthodox repentance? Alas, don't repent if it's all right, God beat you. But as little Karl's information was squeezed into his mind more and more, he, Liu Chongqing, seemed to gradually become a spectator, shrinking in a corner, staring at the stage. Then he fainted again. I don't know if it was because of anger, or if it was a normal reaction to possession. P.S. The Habsburg family, or in other words, every family that goes into decline, is full of sorrows and unlucky. I invite those book friends who feel good about this article to vote for the recommendation, thank you. The soul asks 3 times, come on. Woe am I, where am I from, where will I go? Q, who am I? A, I am Karl Ludwig, one of the 5 great powers in Europe, the Archduke of the Austrian Empire. Q, how did I come here? A, my mother gave birth. Hey, there's nothing wrong with it, it wasn't picked up by the trash can, and it wasn't from the armpit. Q, why did I not have it? A, drink the water of the Jordan River, drink the dead. Q, hey? More specific? A, dirty? Seems wrong, let me think. A, choked to death? It doesn't seem right, let me think about it. A, disgusting? It doesn't seem right, let me think about it. A, oh, the bacteria that infected the Jordan River were killed by viruses. Q, why are there so many bacteria or viruses in the Jordan River? A, ordinary believers are baptized, senior believers are baptized, fanatics are dead, and non-believers are bathing here. Everyone is doing it here. Of course, there are bacteria or viruses. Q, then you still dare to drink? A, this is a place where miracles are often performed. What's wrong with drinking a little? Well, you are free, please continue. Liu Chongqing is now Karl Ludwig, the Karl Ludwig he just ridiculed and despised. It's like seeing how hard it is for people to carry a burden, and it's only when things go through that they don't know how difficult it is, and they only know that Karl Ludwig's burden is very heavy. His son, who became the 2nd Crown Prince of the Empire after the death of Crown Prince Rudolf, was assassinated by several young Serbs during an invitation to visit Sarajevo. The death of people is not clear, the whole thing is not clear, and it also triggered a world war, tens of millions of people died, and trillions of dollars were wiped out. His grandson, the second emperor of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, was fooled by US President Wilson. He did not follow the established rhythm and hurriedly changed the system of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, so that the empire was completely out of control and torn apart. Like his second uncle, he was deposed from the throne by his beloved subjects. After a few thumps, how could it be against the mixed doubles of Britain, France, the United States and the chaotic people of their own country? In the end, he was exiled to the Atlantic Ocean. He died very depressed, when he died young, when he died in poverty, and when he died unknown. His eldest brother, the last emperor of the Austrian Empire and the first emperor of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, worked hard to protect the empire from collapse, trying to keep him from collapsing. With the unnatural deaths of his younger brother, son, wife, and nephew who was the crown prince successively, in the second half of his life, although he was alive, his heart was ashes. His eldest sister-in-law, the famous Princess Sissi, is also his cousin. When traveling in Geneva, she was stabbed to death by an Italian, which is also unclear. Relevant agencies said that this was an anarchist, and that Princess Sissi was just the target of his assassination. Can you say this conclusion, and can we believe it? His nephew, the eldest brother's son, the first crown prince of the empire, in his 30s, said he committed suicide because of love, but another one is unclear. His second brother was shot and killed by his beloved people. Before he was killed, he shook hands with them one by one, directed them to aim at himself, and forgave them. Her younger sister died inexplicably. Just a few days ago, when Xiaoping was only 4 years old, she lost her life inexplicably. His younger brother, because of the death of his younger sister, became the most famous comrade in the European royal family. He himself ran to drink the water of the Jordan River, and died. This strange brain circuit comes from the self-guilt-guided education of the Archbishop. His country is torn apart, fighting for each other, and the sand is scattered. It has become the target of abuse by the strong people in the era of power, and the object of revenge abuse by the strong people in the era of improper power. It is really unfortunate that each has its own misfortune until the 21st century. His people, before Liu Chongqing and Karl merged, were the poorest and most chaotic people in Europe, those who would not appear in the news except for the war. What can I do to save you, my relatives, my country, and myself? Karl Ludwig of China Corps, lying on the bed, eyes closed, preoccupied and worried, sorting out his future life. After combing for a long time, according to the urgent order, I have to save this sister first, and then myself. The second person to save must be yourself, because according to your own patience, in that heavy church, it is hard to say whether you can live to the age of 6, let alone live to the age of 6. For the rest, leave it alone, do it and cherish it, live and be random, adapt. Back to the first and most urgent rescue object, little sister Maria Anna. But what happened to my sister is not clear in the history books. Some say that she was ill, and some said that it was a safety accident. Oh, first of all, we have to find an opportunity for a doctor to check it out. If you are sick, you should treat it. If you are not sick, you should focus on preventing safety accidents. Karl. Liu Chongqing, now a freshly baked Karl Ludwig, opened his eyes when he heard the eager cry. I saw a woman in her 30s, a bit like German Chancellor Angela Merkel, 30 or 40 years younger. This is Karl's old lady, the practical person of the Austrian royal family, Princess Sophie from Bavaria. So you don't know, it doesn't matter, give you a coordinate, give you a reference, and you will be familiar with her. She is the evil mother-in-law of Princess Sissi, a well-known positive figure in the entertainment industry. Hey, about the evil mother-in-law, why did I think about Mammy wrong, with rounded eyes and the appearance of holding a needle to stab someone? Mom, I'm fine. Since it has come, let it be safe, at least it must be safe first. Little Karl, still not strong enough, replied softly. What the is going on? How could it fall like this? Look, several pieces were broken, and several pieces were broken in Muking. The future Empress Dowager is not so strong. After all, she has not yet become an Empress Dowager, not even an Empress. Now Mrs. Sophie is concerned and anxious about her injured little son. It's no different from an ordinary mother who encounters this situation. Maybe I'm tired. I haven't completed the Archbishop's schoolwork a few times recently, and I always think about coming back to be with my parents, as well as my brothers and sisters. I was very regretful again. I felt sorry for God and the Archbishop's earnest teachings, so I went to the confessional room to secretly repent. I didn't know what was going on, so I fell down. Little Carl said half-truths. He really couldn't imagine such distress and helplessness. A 5 or 6-year-old child was arranged to grow up in a heavy church. So he also made some preparations to see if he could find a chance to get out of this bitter sea. He even thought that it would be better to spend a few years in a military academy than in a church. Otherwise, let Carl come back. There's no need to force him to study with the Archbishop now. At least come back for a while to recover from his injuries. A middle-aged man with a beard spoke, his voice soft, with a negotiating tone. This is Karl's father, Archduke Franz Karl. According to history books, his IQ is a little underpaid, just like his elder brother, Ferdinand I, who was the emperor of the Austrian Empire. However, compared with the emperor's elder brother, Franz Karl is better than him in 2 points. One is that he can still have children, but no, he has already given birth to 3 sons and 1 daughter. The other is that he is just dull, but he does not have epilepsy, unlike the emperor's elder brother who often falls ill. The dull and weak father said a few words and stopped talking. The usually strong mother, the famous Mrs. Sophie, like ordinary people, is a rambling mother. She repeats those few words of reassurance over and over again, sometimes with a little bit of blaming herself, the bishop, and the child. After all, Karl Ludwig was still young. He had been forced by the Archbishop and didn't have enough time to rest. He felt an unprecedented sense of relaxation from his mother's chatter, and he fell asleep again after a while. When he woke up again, he didn't open his eyes, he just slowly calmed down, and continued to contemplate his rebirth. Little Karl's China Corps remembers a saying in the history books that the 4th brother, a famous comrade, became a comrade. It was because after the death of her younger sister Maria Anna, her mother who lost her daughter raised him as a girl, which caused something in her heart to be aroused, and she became famous in the entire European royal family in this respect. Of course, as a modern person, and an excellent modern person, an enlightened modern person, and Karl's Chinese core, he does not hold any prejudice against gays or lesbians. But he couldn't help but hope that this unborn younger brother could follow the path of his biological sex, even if he was definitely gay. He didn't want to be trained to be gay. And this younger sister, Maria Anna, of course Karl expects her to grow up healthily, not to die inexplicably as the history books say. By the way, it is the end of January now, and the accident happened to my sister in the beginning of February, so we have to hurry up to save her. Because I don't know exactly what happened to Maria Anna, in the end, I have to use the method of exclusion. Reading www.uuganshu.com. Check the body first, treat the disease if there is a disease, and prevent safety accidents, hygiene accidents, and all possible fatal accidents in this era. Other things, such as the struggle for power and position, don't think about it. There is really no coup d'état or mutiny here in Europe. For example, to make the Austrian Empire stronger, don't worry about it. Prime Minister Metternich and government agencies have been busy with this, professional things, and leave them to professional people. For example, let the second brother not be reckless often without thinking, forget it, let the old lady, Mrs. Sophie, and the big brother worry about it. Also, try to find a way to get yourself out first, from the small dark room of the Archbishop of Vienna, the heavy church. Karl Ludwig himself, died on this matter. If you want to avoid being killed by the Jordan River, you must first make sure not to become a religious madman. If you want to not become a religious maniac, you must first leave the famous archbishop named Joseph Osmer Rauscher. If you want to leave the archbishop and the church, you must first understand why Mrs. Sophie sent herself in. Only by knowing the cause can we prescribe the right medicine, and only by understanding the diagram can we escape from the little black house and start a happy life. After all, it is impossible for a 6-year-old child to forcefully escape from the church. On the contrary, maybe because you insisted on running away, they would think that you are so stubborn and need the grace of the Lord and the education of the archbishop even more. Then there will be heavier religious studies, stricter supervision, and more severe punishment. Then I'll just die immediately. No, don't be afraid. He patted himself and told himself that before the time to give up treatment, I still tried to save myself, my relatives, my country, and my own people. P.S. Archduke Karl, the of War, is a very important character. There will be a lot of space in the first 300 chapters. It can be said that he is the first supporting actor in the first volume. Different people will know him and analyze him from different angles. Please vote for recommendation. Thank you. After a while, several waves of people came over. Seeing that Karl Ludwig was not awake, and surrounded his bed, some people even secretly wiped away tears. After all, in this era, even if medical technology is not developed, there are still many accidents. People say that there is no situation, and this situation is not only encountered by ordinary people, but also by the royal family. Their survival rate is not necessarily higher than that of ordinary people. Therefore, it is very likely that these people who came to see him came with the mentality of seeing him for the last time. Some people, who didn't have this mentality at first, saw that he hadn't woken up and looked at it for the last time. Fortunately, Karl was still awake, and bravely opened his eyes, ready to confront this world. Karl, how are you feeling now? First, the eldest brother Franz Joseph, who walked in quickly, paused again at the bedside, with a concerned expression, but a little less eager. The eldest brother is actually a skinny little boy. After all, he was born in 1830. He is only 11 years old now, but he looks like a skinny old man. I don't know if it has been officially announced that he will be the crown prince, or it has been said in private that he needs to look like the crown prince, and his words are also old-fashioned and stable. Brother, thank you. I'm much better, don't worry too much. At first, my head hurt, I felt like I was going to die, but now I'm fine. Karl answered the elder brother carefully. After all, he is both the eldest brother and the king. Thirdest, don't be a fool. You seem to have died a few times. It seems that you have experience, and you know what it is like to be dead. A loud voice came in, also a little boy, also thin, even taller, not much shorter than the elder brother who was 2 years older. The overall feeling is a bit wild and uninhibited. It may be natural, or it may be that people relax a lot without wearing that heavy crown. This unobtrusive little lady should be the Emperor of Mexico in history, Maximilian I. He is an idealist and a poor little man. He was fooled by the old fox Napoleon III and lost his life in Mexico. Second brother, thank you, I have never died. Don't everyone say the same about the indescribable pain. Karl replied seriously to his second brother. He didn't blame the second brother for his carelessness, as if he didn't care about him. It is estimated that it is this temperament, thinking about his behavior in history, I understand more or less. Third brother, you'll be fine. A timid voice followed behind the second brother, who should be the little girl who was going to have an accident. She is also the fourth eldest of the 4 remaining siblings, Grand Duchess Maria Anna. Yes, it's really okay. When my parents came over, I felt a little dazed. Now that you guys are here, I seem to be all awake. Thank you eldest brother, second brother, and younger sister. Karl sensible thank you one by one. For the newly released little Karl, although others don't know about it, he still has some knowledge in his heart. These people are actually meeting for the first time, so please take care of them. Generally speaking, the eldest brother and the second brother have the same appearance, they are both thin, which fit the description of bamboo poles, but their personalities are very different. The little girl looked just like the famous American child star Shirley Temple. She was fat and very cute. The brothers and sisters hadn't chatted a few words when they heard His Majesty Ferdinand I is here. The four of them quickly stood up, turned to the door, greeted the husband and wife with their eyes, and said in unison, "My emperor is healthy. God bless you." The devout Catholics, the Ferdinands bowed and said, "My family, in private, don't be too restrictive. The three of you sit down." Emperor Ferdinand first spoke to the other three, and then to Karl alone, "Little Karl, lie down." The old emperor is not old, his actual age is in his 40s, and he looks like a European uncle in his 50s. The emperor looked good as a whole. You must know that he lived 30 years younger after he abdicated, and died at the age of 83. His Majesty Ferdinand I has the appearance of a modern man, with a bare face, like an out-of-date cream pie. Although the handsomeness is gone, the charm is gone, but it is not sloppy, nor greasy, at least not with the typical Habsburg beard. Like Karl's two older brothers, Ferdinand himself is relatively thin, neither kind nor dignified, just a thin and clean uncle. Although the emperor doesn't seem to have such clear and flexible eyes, at most he is honest and dull. He doesn't seem to have a problem with his intelligence as stated in the history books. Maybe now is his normal time. "Karl, what's going on? Why did you fall down? Do you still have a headache?" the royal aunt asked. The royal aunt, Maria Anna, was the Princess of Sardinia and the second cousin of Emperor Ferdinand I. Aunt Huang also looked like an ordinary person, she was also thin and not short. Compared with Mrs. Sophie, she is not as strong as her. Maybe it is more tiring to take care of the emperor. It is said that the emperor has more frequent epileptic seizures. "Thank you, Aunt Royal. The main reason is that I failed to complete the schoolwork assigned by the Archbishop. I felt very guilty, and I was too tired. I accidentally fell asleep when I was repenting, and I fell down without knowing what was going on. I had a headache before, but it's much better now." "Thank you, Auntie Royale." Karl repeated the old words. "It is also to emphasize that there are many courses, I am still young, and my intelligence has not developed enough, and my small shoulders cannot bear such a heavy religious education. I also wanted to see if the Uncle Huang and his wife could save me and bring me back from the Archbishop." The Uncle Huang and his wife didn't talk much about this topic. Thinking that at that time, my father heard this request and answered a little, and my mother didn't say much. Karl knew that, firstly, the husband and wife were unwilling to interfere with their younger siblings' education of their children, and secondly, Father Franz Karl did not have much power. "It seems that I still have to find the old lady, the villain in the world-famous Princess Sissy, Mrs. Sophie." Thinking about it carefully, this is also true. The old man and the uncle were weak in intelligence and also weak in body. Although Ferdinand I lived for 83 years and Franz Karl lived for 77 years, it was considered a long life at that time. But now, no one knows that they can live for so long, and everyone has the plan that if they say no, they won't. So Mrs. Sophie had to make up her mind about many things about the four children. This is not like Kostan, the Queen Mother Yehenera Singzhen, who can take the children of her younger sister and brother-in-law over to raise them by herself. Regarding everyone's belief that the emperor's brothers may be gone if they say no, this is not nonsense. The main reason is that they are ill and congenitally weak, so the possibility of suddenly disappearing is much higher. Don't think that the royal family is very powerful, not to mention that a certain emperor died, such a single event, let's say extinction, this kind of overall event, at that time, was also a lot in the royal family. Just to name a few examples that everyone knows. Let's talk about the two most famous Napoleon family. The son of Napoleon I, the King of Rome, Napoleon II, died of tuberculosis at the age of 21 and became extinct. Napoleon I's nephew, the famous mouth cannon, Napoleon III, his only son, Napoleon IV, was killed by a black gun at the age of 23, in the British African Expeditionary Force, extinct. Speaking of the royal family of the Austrian Empire, the focus of this book is also a model of lower body governance. The Habsburg family has died out from several branches, and only the protagonist of the book remains. As for the recent situation of the Habsburg family, I can introduce it in detail. Karl Lou's royal uncle has no children and is extinct. Father Karl's family was divided into four. Among the four brothers, the eldest brother, Emperor Franz Joseph, gave birth to a son and a daughter. Crown Prince Rudolf committed suicide and became extinct. The second brother Maximilian married and had no children. Extinct. Fourth brother Victor did not get married and had no children, extinct. There is also the Prussian royal family, the second focus of this book, the Hohenzollern family, which also lost several branches. In the late 19th century only two remained, one in Prussia and one in Romania. There is also the royal family of Hay-Duncking. This book will also mention that the Ixingeluo family, in the end, the Tongzhi Emperor's family is extinct, and a cousin is needed to succeed him, and the Guangxu Emperor's family is extinct, and a cousin is needed to succeed the throne. The Xiantong Emperor's family has no descendants and is also extinct. Regarding the issue of the royal extinction, let's talk about it first, and then go into detail in the necessary chapters. Despite being a member of the Council of Regents, Archduke Franz Karl, this old man still obeyed his mother a lot, which also strengthened Madame Sophie's strong character. The reason why she is said to have strengthened her strength is because it is said that she is already strong, which also laid a solid foundation for her to be the villain in Princess Sissy's big movie. In a word, Mrs. Sophie has to be asked about such trivial matters. Regarding the criteria for identifying major and trivial matters at home, reading www. Of course, UUGonshu.com was also ordered by Mrs. Sophie. Just after the uncle and his wife left, the famous Archduke Karl came over as well. Archduke Karl is a soldier who can be called a military strategist. He was the first person to defeat Napoleon Hedon after his rise. It is said that Napoleon himself admitted that among his opponents, Archduke Karl was also good. Archduke Karl was also barefaced, with two slender tufts of hair on his temples, unlike the adult Franz Joseph I, who had a thick, long, and profuse beard. Little Karl, how are you? I think you're still like a calf, so it looks like you're fine. Archduke Karl is almost 70 years old, but he seems to be in good health. This old guy is the pillar of the Habsburg family and the pinnacle of the Austrian Empire. It is said that he died suddenly. He was usually as strong as an ox. Once, he drank too much and broke his spine. He died soon after. Thank you, Uncle Karl. It's almost done. If you don't go to the Archbishop, I can pour you wine again. When little Karl saw this big man, he planned to take advantage of it. With Duke Karl's age and stubbornness, I'm afraid it won't work if I want to tell him not to drink. Since drinking is uncontrollable, it would be good to think about how to make Dingations and stay for 2 more years. Franz can't pour me wine anymore, and Max is too wild. He didn't pour as much. Well, it's just you, little thing, take little Maria and come to our place to play. Archduke Karl is a serious man, and he is not thick-skinned, so he can only accept tricks. Oh, you can go to Uncle Karl's place to play, have fun. When Maria Anna heard the news, she jumped for joy. Karl knew, however, that he had to wait for the approval of the tyrant at home, Mrs. Sophie. After a while, Franz Karl and Mrs. Sophie came over, greeted their uncle, the Grand Duke Karl, and comforted little Karl again. Just now, little Karl said that he was coming back from the church and often poured me wine. Are you planning to make Karl a monk? What our Habsburg family lacks are warriors. Archduke Karl has a relatively high status and is an elder. He is very direct and has no scruples. He glanced at little Karl lying on the bed, and asked Mrs. Sophie. Uncle Karl, I'm not going to send little Karl to be a monk. You know, those who are sent to be a monk are people who have caused great negative impact or harm to the family. Karl is still young, what can he do for the family? Harm. Without waiting for the formal head of the family, Franz Karl, to speak, Grand Duchess Sophie answered directly. The main reason is that we trust Archbishop Joseph Osmar Rauscher, and we also want Karl to do a basic religious education. Mrs. Sophie was afraid of old Karl's misunderstanding, and said, No, we originally planned to call him back. After all, it's little Karl's 6th birthday soon. Before you know it, little Karl is 6 years old. After Sophie explained to Archduke Karl, she watched little Karl lying on the bed, tall and tall. Just muttered to her husband Franz Karl. Little Karl, don't do bad things, don't do wrong things, your parents won't send you to be a monk. Archduke Karl understood, it was just a gift to trusted priests, but when the child suffered from paranoia, he thought he would stay in the church all the time. So a joke. Yet, time is so fast. I remember it was yesterday when I had a fight with Napoleon. Why did things suddenly go wrong? Archduke Karl started his solo show. The expression on the of war is very rich, there is unwillingness, sadness, and helplessness, but he is not sweating profusely. Come, come, come again. Sophie and Franz Karl looked at each other and smiled, waiting for the awesome Uncle Karl to brag. I can ask more details this time, and make Uncle Karl make a fool of himself. Maximilian's eldest brother said in a low voice. That's not good. After all, Uncle Karl is an elder. I heard that he is the pinnacle of our Austrian Empire. After all, Franz is a bit older, and he probably knew that he was going to be the crown prince. Although the boy's temperament to watch the fun was not a big deal, he still thought a lot, and he didn't dare to follow the second child to play tricks on old Karl. Brother, you look like an old man. I don't think your uncle and father are as calm as you, not to mention Uncle Karl. Prime Minister Metternich also competes with you on the shelf. Maximilian even teased his elder brother. Max, don't murmur, stay with Franz and learn from Uncle Karl. Sophie is very smart, knowing whether she is a queen or a queen dowager is inseparable from the support of Archduke Karl. Therefore, he respects Duke Karl, although he is somewhat disapproving of his story in his heart. Okay, Sophie, don't scold them, just listen to the old man's bragging. Old Karl was actually a little self-aware. My own kids don't like to listen to their own nagging, let alone others. However, he also knew that the military authority of Austria in the future would be dominated by a few little guys present, and it was also appropriate to provide them with a military foundation. Taking this opportunity, he also wanted to change his personality. From the formal mode of the military commander giving lectures to the stupid and cute military newcomers, to the chat mode of old grandfathers and grandchildren who have stories to brag about. It is said in the anecdotes that Napoleon, Wellington, and I were the best military generals in that glorious era. It was God who gave us the stage to show us our military talents. Old Karl raised his head, but unfortunately it was too high-end to respond, so everyone had to sit up and listen carefully. Actually not, Napoleon is the real first person, he is the protagonist. At that time, many people were too low-level, and they used failure to set off Napoleon's brilliance. Everyone nodded. Old Karl didn't stop, he continued to be humble, and he pretended to be humble. Wellington and I are a little stronger, and we have had a few small successes. However, we are just setting off Napoleon and making Napoleon appear more powerful. How can people make fun of this? The three little Karl brothers and Franz Karl and his wife are a little uncomfortable with this rhythm. The stupid Maria Anna doesn't understand at all, not to mention her reaction. If this is a story about Napoleon and Wellington and I, like the other losers, continue to fail, it will make the story dry and Napoleon's image not full enough. Old Karl looked at everyone with a solemn expression, and felt more satisfied in his heart, and his voice was full of emotions. So the storyteller God sent me and Wellington to paint Napoleon's coat in another form. Maria Anna, she didn't understand at all, she stared at old Karl's mouth with wide eyes, she probably wanted to see if there was any. If there is sugar, it can follow his words. In the eyes of God, we are like in the Chinese story, the maids who hold umbrellas for the emperor, so that the royal council hall does not look like a dry image. An emperor sits alone in the palace, and a courtroom is prostrate. It's so vivid, everyone can imagine this scene in their minds. Our existence makes the Golden Throne Hall have masters and subordinates, so that it forms a normal staircase with the officials below, rather than the palace's high steps and the abrupt feeling of steep cliffs. The military spoke in an eloquent manner, very calm, and he even sat upright to make himself more comfortable. Old Karl's storytelling ability has become much stronger. Sophie and her husband looked at each other, and the thought came to their minds. Uncle Karl, why don't you say that you and the Duke of Wellington are eunuchs? You don't have a beard, and Wellington doesn't have a beard. Isn't it like the in Chinese stories? Maximilian turned into Tyrishan, stunned the old gods of the family for a while, and the squinted eyes that old Karl usually showed calm were about to open into circles. Presumptuous, Max, how do you talk to your uncle? Franz Karl was insensitive, and he was still laughing. Mrs. Sophie scolded the little Max. Mrs. Sophie, my uncle tells stories. I interact with my uncle, don't you think so? Uncle and Wellington are more like eunuchs in Chinese stories. The maid is standing, the emperor is sitting, and the maid is holding a cover. Fan, in fact, looks taller than the emperor, and the maid is definitely better than the emperor. The minister leaned over maybe because he didn't want to see the emperor's ugly face. Maximilian, who has a clear brain circuit, changed the picture for everyone. And the bends over and bows, and is generally a little shorter than the emperor. Napoleon is the best, Uncle Karl and the Duke of Wellington are the next best, isn't it just the emperor and the eunuch's sense of sight? Maximilian was still unconvinced by the argument, and what he said seemed to make sense. The books that the second brother read are all comic editions. In fact, most of the Chinese emperors are handsome, except that the first generation may be a little ugly, and the descendants have been optimized by beauty pageants, so there is no possibility of ugliness. Even if the first emperor was ugly, it was only possible. It seemed that apart from Zhu Yuanzhang, the first emperor was not ugly. When little Karl heard the second brother's words, he suspected that what he was reading was not a serious history book, but a comic book. In the history books I read, the emperors of China are all full of heaven and square, and they look like they are rich and noble, and they look like emperors. Bah, why are you still thinking about this? You have to let the story of Uncle Karl go on. Second brother, you have affected my basic military education, and it is a scenario version. The case mentioned by the parties is a rare opportunity. Little Karl had to turn his mind around. Max, let me out. Mrs. Sophie was in a rage. She knew that this second son was not easy to manage, and it was already serious. I didn't expect it. She stood up abruptly and shouted sharply at Maximilian. Forget it, Sophie, children know that expressing different opinions with adults is actually a good phenomenon, at least they won't freeze their heads. You two go back, I will brag with the little guys for a while. Old Karl is worthy of being a genius. He quickly adapted to the new rhythm. First, let Franz Karl and his wife go away. They can't benefit from their lectures. After all, their heads should be rigid, and they have already been rigid. Let's brainwash the little ones. Uncle Karl, you are too used to them. Otherwise, take Max into the army. I heard that the son of the King of Prussia, Frederick Carr, is also a worry-free guy. He was sent to the Praetorian Guard for training at the age of 10. It seems that he has a lot of peace of mind now. Mrs. Sophie and Uncle Carl relaxed, then solemnly. The villain is worthy of being a villain, but he is too smart, otherwise he wouldn't be an OSS. No, not only sells well, but also sends out the hot potato. In a few years, you will still receive the finished product Maximilian. It kills 3 birds with 1 stone, and is better than the professional eagle shooter, Guojing, who is slightly better than 3 or 5 rays. Little Carl admires his cheap old lady more and more. As expected, she is the who can play the good princess of the people, Sissy, in the palm of her hand. I won't make trouble anymore. I'll stay here with my brother, and listen to Uncle Carl's story. Mom and Dad, please go to work beforehand. Maximilian was just a little reckless, but not really stupid. He watched his mother and uncle chat for a while, and then he could talk about him in the army. Yu reading www.yuyuganshu.com. Hurry up and pretend to be a grandson, make a statement. Oh, no need to pretend, this is a grandson in the first place. Sophie, go back. Regarding Max's entry into the army, we will talk about it later. His temperament needs to be sharpened, but I am also afraid that his creativity will be interrupted. Carl glanced at Maximilian, paused, and continued, actually, I like Max very much. In the case of passing military literacy, such a person may score a score of 100, of course, if he lacks basic military knowledge and experience, he may lead the army to fight, and the entire army may be wiped out, that is, 0 marks. Archduke Karl and Sophie whispered. In this way, Uncle Carl, take the little guys to play first, and I'll pick you up for dinner later. Sophie did not expect Archduke Karl to have such an opinion on Maximilian. Okay, kids, listen to the card first. Uncle ER tells stories. Don't be a demon, you know, Max. Sophie said a word to the little guys, and then asked Maximilian, the troublemaker, alone. Okay, Mom, everyone responded promptly. Okay Mom, I won't interrupt, Mrs. Sophie. Maximi even tucked his tail, but his nature was hard to change, so he made fun of his mother. I don't know if he was used to it, or he didn't know enough about the power of masturbation. Okay, your parents are gone, we can relax and talk. Max, don't be so nervous, hee, you look like you can't hold back. Archduke Karl told the children that he saw Maximilian who wanted to speak but could not speak, his eyes were wide open, he swallowed from time to time, and his throat moved frequently. Thank you, Uncle. Mrs. Sophie is simply a devil. I'm very afraid of her. Maximilian straightened up and said, that sense of justice is like you Buchan's possession. I'm also afraid of Mrs. Sophie. The cute Maria Anna said, there was still some milky voice left. I don't usually see that you're afraid of her. You're only afraid when you're beaten. If your uncle didn't intercede today, you'd have to lose another layer of skin. The elder brother Franz ignored the stupid and cute Maria looking for a sense of existence, and said to Maximilian. Ha, although my uncle saved the little one's life, but I don't thank him, why, because I was almost beaten because of my uncle, he just calmed down the war caused by him, we don't have to hold grudges or thank you. Is it not, Uncle Carl? Maximilian turned to Archduke Karl, looking like he had been beaten up. You too, do you have any idea of going to the army for some training? The old military paused for a while and continued, if there is some, I can arrange it, but I can't be afraid of suffering and being tired. I usually train with sweat and not tears, so that I can bleed less and not lose my life in wartime. Another sudden turning point came. Defending one's own reputation is a reputation. If you have the idea of messing around with the army, don't look for me. I can't afford to lose that person. Archduke Karl spoke to the 2 little guys, referring to the 2 big ones, changing the subject and mastering the rhythm. Everyone knows this. Almost all the nobles in Austria have been in the army for a few years, but those who can really fight are very few. The Grand Duke exists as a military god, and pushes people into the army. If it is a mess, it will indeed affect the Grand Duke's reputation. The Grand Duke recommends you to join the army, just like the guarantor of a loan. Uncle Karl, you know my situation. Although I haven't officially said it, it's not up to me whether I can leave Vienna for a long time. Although I want to experience the army. Franz Joseph, showing a prudent appearance, said nothing without revealing it. I usually come here according to the military's requirements, but it's too hard for me, I feel too tight, and it looks like I can break at any time. Franz Joseph answered old Karl with a sense of exhaustion. Hearing what the elder brother said, little Karl knew that there was no official edict to call Franz Joseph as the crown prince, but everyone knew about the situation of his father, Franz Karl, who was better than his eldest uncle Ferdinand I. Then a bit. But for the emperor, especially the emperor of the Austrian Empire with such a big business and such an important position, Father Franz Karl is actually not very good. So everyone basically had a consensus that after Ferdinand I died, Franz Joseph would succeed him. This 11-year-old little thing has stronger intelligence than his 39-year-old father and 48-year-old uncle, or at least reacts much faster than them. The reason why Franz Karl still wears the title of Crown Prince is because at the beginning, no one knew when Ferdinand I died. The children in Franz Karl's family were all still young. If Ferdinand I died early, Franz Karl would have to succeed him for a while, for the sake of the old HA family and the Austrian Empire. Now it seems that several children have grown up, and even Maximilian, who was born in 1832, when he was only 9 years old, is no worse than his father's intellectual performance. How can people know about the current affairs of the empire, whether it is Ferdinand I or Franz Karl? There are still 30 years to live. Uncle Karl, I don't really want to go to the army. Here, except where Mrs. Sophie the devil is, I have a pretty good time, really. Maximilian replied with a solemn look to the old uncle, although I have been suppressed by Mrs. Sophie a lot, but after all, Mrs. Sophie is very busy and doesn't have time to stare at me and suppress me all day. Besides, in a few years, I can go to the city defense team. Maximilian is very smart. He is very clear about his current situation and knows the authority of Archduke Karl. Don't watch the old man tell you stories with a smile, but if you really want to go to the army, then you're in his cage, so what else can you expect? Uncle Karl, I also want to go to the army. Little Karl is cute to the military god. Little Karl, wait a moment, it will be a few more years. The war ignored the cuteness, and his attention was still on the two big ones, Franz and Maximilian. The two of them were chilled by the military god's stare, but they didn't dare to make trouble. Uncle Karl, I want to hear a story. Maria interrupted old Karl's contemplation. Franz and Maximilian also felt light on their bodies. It felt as if the pressure from Genhai Shenzen's eyes had been removed. Thank you, silly Maria. Okay, my little Maria is going to hear a story. Old Karl picked up Maria and sat on his lap, and said with a smile. From this point of view, it is still useful to sell cute. If it is not useful, then sell cute again until it is useful. Little Karl concluded in his heart. Napoleon is a military genius, but no matter how talented he is, he shouldn't be so fierce. Judging from his early wars, all victories should be victories. As long as he has basic military literacy, that is 70 points on a 100% scale, plus understanding depending on the relevant situation of the warring parties, it is possible to win the war even by changing individuals. Old Karl took a sip of water, waiting for his little nephews to understand that he could also score what Napoleon did at that time. Until 1798, in those wars that should not have been won, he also won. The old uncle stopped talking about storytelling, and Karl thought that if he came out of the mountains, he would not be anything like Shan Tianfang, Mei Lanfang, Zhao Difang, or Xiao Fang with a braid in the village. Of course, Napoleon's military literacy is not 70 points, but 90 points, or even 95 points. So in some places where he should lose a little, he will win a little, where he should win a little, he will win. Great victory! Karl glanced at the two big ones, they were listening carefully, and he continued, but these have nothing to do with genius. With enough effort and enough war resources, ordinary military generals can do it. The old military has a feeling that he has entered the role himself, which means, I can do it too, at the same level as Napoleon. I summed up later, before 1798, Napoleon's victories were victories, and they were victories after battles, they were victories hard, and they were victories by battles, fail. Of course, these small defeats, or victories, won't affect his reputation as the greatest military strategist and the greatest military genius. With a snap, old Karl slapped the table, and even his voice became louder. After 1798, there have been a large number of victories with less, more with the weak, and even without a fight. It's like a broken bamboo, like a tiger descending a mountain and a waterfall falling into the sea. How do you feel when you hear these words? Old Karl asked a question, ready to answer it himself. There just happened to be a picture of a tiger descending from the mountain on the wall, but there was no picture of a waterfall entering the sea. There was a picture of a waterfall hanging on Chien Chuan, which was very visual and echoed the questioning of old Karl. Even then everyone was blinded by Napoleon. They were afraid when they saw it, they hid when they saw it, and they surrendered after receiving the battle. Franz Joseph said, it is more specific and general. Napoleon has already rode the wind down, and he feels that he is in line with the general trend. No one can stop the strong wind, nor the general trend, nor can he stop Napoleon. Maximilian further said that it is like a metaphysical cannon, a keyboard party. In fact, it is to control the general trend, but first, we must recognize the general trend, take advantage of the general trend, and then control the general trend. Little Karl thought to himself, he knew this. After all, the age is, and there are comments from later generations. But he said nothing. Yes, you are all right. Napoleon accumulated small victories first, and the army in his hand formed the confidence of victory in battle through the continuous victories, and even transformed the belief in victory in battle. Little Karl knows that belief is a level higher than confidence, and it is difficult to break. To speculate on the meaning of the old military god, Napoleon has turned the scrap iron of the French army into steel after years of polishing. Okay, with these general understandings, let's start with specific stories. It can also be seen from this that old Karl's brain is still very good. He knows to give an overview first, so that you can know the overall situation, and then use detailed things to describe and lay out. Just like using beta maps to navigate, first zoom out to see the whole situation, and you probably know several major highways or ramp entrances and exits. Next, just listen to Sisters Hilling's guidance. Seeing everyone's sleepy appearance, Archduke Karl gave everyone a refreshing topic. It's ridiculous, do you know? The greatest French military strategist, the greatest emperor, was anti-French in the beginning. What is strange, there are such cases everywhere. Comrade Hitler, the most powerful leader of Germany, was from our Greater Austria. At first, he also thought that Prussia was a native and illiterate. Russia's most powerful leader, Daddy Zuyashvili, yes, that guy with a pipe in his mouth, with a kind and wise light in his eyes, or Georgia, he doesn't look down on the Russian brown bear at all. Austria's most powerful military strategist, the benefactor who saved Austria, it is said that the military commander who is more powerful than your old Karl Wallenstein, is still from the Czech Republic. Loyalty, and later, bargaining. Little Karl held out 4 chestnuts for him in a row in his mind, all of which were heavyweight chestnuts, and his hands were tired. Napoleon was born in Corsica in 1769. Most people on this island have the idea of independence from France. Karl is not clear about this. It turns out that Napoleon still has this part. Napoleon was born and grew up in that environment, and of course he was no exception. At first he thought he was Corsican, not French. Little Karl, who was used to seeing strong winds and waves, thought about all the great people in the future, and was very disdainful of his uncle, old Karl, who was ignorant. But he didn't dare to show it. He still pretended to be a grandson, seriously a real grandson, to pretend to be a grandson, no need for makeup or rehearsal. Borrowing the sentence pattern of lying to win, pretending to be a grandson means lying down for little Karl, and it's an easy mess. But he can only think about it. Anyway, the Corsicans have been thinking about independence for many years, and they are still in the thinking stage. Thinking, although it does not help Corsican independence, nor will it hinder Corsica's independence. Hee. Listening to this, you can tell that old Karl is fighting against the petty nationalists. You can hear his hee, which is very intimidating. Napoleon is still like many ordinary people, and his ultimate goal is to develop in big cities, such as Paris. At the end of 1778, 10-year-old Napoleon left Corsica, the small island where he was born and raised, and went to France to pursue his dreams. Napoleon, like his ancestors, opposes France while yearning for France, scolds France while abiding by the rules of France. P.S. These chapters of bragging by the great man are Napoleon's old opponent and the only real opponent recognized by Napoleon, Archduke Karl's point of view to look at Napoleon. Please cast a few votes. Thanks. Napoleon at that time was really pitiful, ridiculous, and unfortunate, Uncle Karl. Franz Joseph gave a perceptive smirk. Franz Joseph's appearance is actually the best to hold a joke, because there is a big contrast between his seriousness and the cleverness of a person holding a joke. If this contrast is placed on the stage of Guo de Gang's family in later generations, it can also cause quite a laughing fruit. It was already 1779 when he settled down in mainland France. He first mixed in the Orton High School, riding a donkey to find a horse, and then with the help of his father, Napoleon opened the back door and entered a military school, the Brienne Military Academy. Old Karl smiled slightly at the actual little crown prince, and the admiring eyes could be seen by the blind to mean "I'm optimistic about you," and continued. A person from a small place, when he arrives in mainland France, he is a complete bumpkin, plus he is short, and of course he is discriminated against by his native French classmates. Although I don't know how these classmates got their sense of superiority, but they do. When discrimination can't satisfy the little guys, they have to bully them. Punching and kicking are common, not to mention supporting them. Corsicans are too funny, aren't they? The second brother, Maximilian, just didn't know where he was going, and he has only now recollected it and started to hold the previous slap. Old Karl also gave him an encouraging look, but continued to ignore him. Military academies are full of teenagers, and they can't help breaking even the simple and easy-to-follow school rules, not to mention bullying. Maria yawned and saliva came out, but the old war didn't see it, and was still introducing her old friend Napoleon vividly. Our protagonist, Napoleon, was very unhappy. He couldn't even beat him single-handedly, and the other party was holding a lot of people together. He was alone, with various emotions such as depression, suffocation, depression, etc. Napoleon was mixed with misery. Little Karl can imagine how hard Napoleon felt. His Chinese corps in his previous life was bullied by hooligans when he was studying. The so-called little ruffian will seal your collar in the classroom, ask for money to buy cigarettes, and beat him if you don't give it. He also acted ruthlessly twice, secretly smashing people with bricks behind his back. He felt that even if the smashed people were found, he would not admit it, and there was no evidence. What can you do? Napoleon thinks he has a perfect plan for this, and is hiding and having fun. A bunch of people are looking for it. Whether you admit it or not, or even whether you did it or not, let's beat it first, at least get out of breath. It's not out of anger. Maximilian couldn't help but sighed for Napoleon, and felt sorry for Napoleon, and by the way, he made fun of Austria. Napoleon is really unlucky. We don't have such scum to bully people in Great Austria, right? After listening to the second brother's words, little Karl remembered the story of the kind-hearted Emperor Hui of Jin who persuaded his people to why not eat minced meat. Of course, old Karl's strong voice continued to float in his ears, which was similar to Master Zhao Jin's explanation of the animal world, and it was very contagious. Spring is here, everything is revived, and the prairie is in the mating season of animals. The rainy season has passed again, and it is mating season. The male turtles lie on the female turtles and shake gently. Oh, let me go, in the turtle world, the females are quite active. When will we be like this in the human world? The old scalpers won't die of exhaustion, and Jet Li won't be full of grey hair. So later on, Napoleon had to pray to the Lord that no one else would beat these bad guys, and even knowing that someone was going to play tricks, he had to tip off these bad guys to prove his innocence, reduce the bitterness of the flesh. Karl thought that the night before he was molested by God, his girlfriend was like a female turtle, but unfortunately he was already a sage and blinded his girlfriend's initiative. Can you imagine Napoleon's distress and helplessness? He cried every night until dawn, and after dawn he would cringe and stay up until late. Napoleon, thin and small, his complexion was dark but not dull. After all, he was born on an island and was exposed to the wind and the sun all day long, just like a Filipino servant. Wearing a grey military uniform, timid, leaning against the wall, looking around all the way, looking like a shriveled man, he came to the big boss, raised his hands to his forehead, and shouted a report. Before he could speak, he was slapped by the bully, slapped his hat crooked, and covered Napoleon's hateful eyes. Hearing his uncle's sigh, little Karl immediately added a scene to Napoleon the Great. Oh, uncle, is Napoleon so miserable? I always feel that you are arranging him. Although you defeated Napoleon once, Napoleon defeated you many times. This was Maximilian's voice, interrupting the little Karl's melodrama arrangement for Napoleon the Great. You have a lump in your heart, but you can't do it. Anyway, Napoleon is dead, and he won't lift the coffin board and climb out to refute you. You can pour pot water on Napoleon's head. The king of the king, Maximilian, couldn't hold back, and another wave of came. However, it sounds like there is also some logical support. But Napoleon was a smart man after all. He quickly figured out that in school, he still depends on his academic performance. He came in through the back door, and his grades were not good. He was short and rustic, and of course he was bullied. Ding Gationsen squinted at Maximilian, his expression was that the army welcomes you, you. And ignore him, just go on saying what you should say. If he gets good grades, teachers and principals will pay attention to him. Who dares to bully him? Napoleon had to study hard in order to change the tragic situation. Seeing the look in old Karl's eyes, Maximilian wilted at once, but he still wanted to save him, so he pretended to be listening carefully. As soon as one learns, the world is wide open. Since Napoleon read books seriously, it seems that no villain will harass him anymore. He is immersed in the ocean of knowledge, roaming freely, and sometimes he is too immersed in a certain knowledge. Almost drowned. Old Karl noticed that everyone was a little confused by his immersion and drowning memes, and explained, "Oh, it's the point of the bull's horn that almost caused a problem. For example, in geometry, the teacher he often asks is speechless and loses face. It is conceivable that some people asked the teacher a question, but the teacher blushed and couldn't answer. God bless Napoleon, fortunately, there was no problem in the end. The teacher didn't put the newly made shoes on the feet of this little thing who loves to learn, study, and ask questions. Uncle Karl, is Napoleon's emotional intelligence very low? How can the teacher be prevented from coming down the stage?" Franz Joseph asked. "Brother, man, once you get to the point of a bull's horn, your emotional intelligence will inevitably drop off a cliff. Little Karl gave his big brother a reply in his heart. Old Karl ignored Franz's question. He probably wanted the grandnephew who was going to be the emperor to understand himself. He just nodded to Franz Joseph, expressing his approval of your independent way of thinking. He goes on to introduce Napoleon. Everything is afraid of seriousness. Napoleon studied hard, and he has gradually become an excellent student from a transfer student who entered through the back door. In 1784, our protagonist graduated from the school with honors and was sent to the famous Paris Military Academy. It seems that I still have to study hard. Tyrian sighed with emotion. Because I was immersed in learning, I learned well in all subjects, especially geometry. Artillery just needs people who are good at mathematics, especially those who are outstanding in geometry. In this way, Napoleon entered the most awesome artillery in the military academy. Division. Not only at that time, but the artillery department is the most powerful until now, and I don't know what will surpass him in the future. Old Karl also sighed with emotion. In fact, what he expressed was that, except for the artillery department, your other subjects are garbage. I am not targeting anyone, but emphasizing a fact, an ironclad fact. Looking at Uncle Karl's stern look, little Karl's mind immediately came up with the scene of the Lord of Destruction, Sven, when senior brother Broken Water made his first appearance. He was deserting like an honest and obedient student. He used correction fluid to carefully erase the other 4 subjects, and wiped the ink on his sleeve with the eraser on the top of the pencil. Then formally demanded the cancellation of all subjects, except karate. Then, in response to the Black Bear's question, he answered, "I'm sorry, I'm not targeting you, I mean, everyone here is smart." Little Karl looked like he was sitting upright, and answered him inwardly, "Uncle, in the following subjects, he would surpass artillery. First, the staff section, after being trained by the Prussian soldiers, will come out, and it will definitely surpass the artillery section. Second, in the field of navigation, no matter how much the British are perfected, they will surpass the field of artillery. Third, the aviation department, in another 60 or 70 years, will surpass the artillery department." In his mind, he still imagined that Uncle Karl, the old man, didn't believe it, refused to accept it, and even "Don't listen, I don't listen. You must know that Archduke Karl, like Napoleon, is a good player in the coordination of infantry and artillery, and they all rely on this to determine their opponents. I'll give you a compliment for half an hour. It seems that the compliment will continue, so I'll give you a raid for 5 minutes. Ordinary people can't bear it at all. Life is never smooth sailing. Napoleon has just seized the rhythm of life and is ready to continue his success in the artillery department. Give him a thunderbolt on a sunny day." There was a sound outside, thinking it was a dull thunder, and God came to echo the old war god, and only later learned that it was the sound of a guard officer shooting himself. In 1785, his father died. Napoleon lost his source of living, that is, the source of his living expenses, so he had to leave school quickly to make a living. It's unfortunate. Just on the right track, his father left. Franz sighed with emotion. Now some people say that he graduated early, of course not. It only takes half a year from enrollment to leaving, how can he graduate? You think that the Paris Military Academy is a short-term training class, with a mixed degree. If it wasn't for the fact that the old uncle definitely didn't know about the future, little Karl would have thought he was mocking those MBAs and EMBAs in a certain country. Napoleon, who is self-pity and self-pity, is not pitiful. He is a professional, and he is an excellent professional. There are not many units that need such professionals, but they are very strong. The army. Yes, the artilleryman is so awesome. How could he be unemployed? I will also be an artilleryman in the future. Tyrian didn't plan to be a soldier before, but now he's about to be an artilleryman. I don't know what he thinks. Maybe it's the old uncle's tricks. Old Karl gave Maximilian an encouraging look. He soon joined the Raphael Corps. He started directly as a second lieutenant. You know, those who have officially graduated from the Paris Military Academy are also the second lieutenants. Because there is a real lack of talents, and Napoleon's level is really good, it is all due to his geometric foundation that he almost drowned, and his artillery level is really not weaker than that of a formal graduate. Perhaps entering the Raphael Legion is the same treatment as a formal graduate, which has become the reason why others praise him for graduating early, but not graduating is not graduating. There is no need to beautify Napoleon so much. Napoleon's failure to graduate will not affect his greatness. Little Karl also recognized it very much. Later generations said that a person is awesome, and he must say that he started from scratch, that he is not well dressed, has no food to eat, and then, he is awesome. It's just a logic. Napoleon's greatness has begun to appear again. Many people have been working on their own after work, and they are confused, and then they achieve nothing, and they are mediocre to death. This scolding, just scolded a circle, scolded a lot, scolded one piece. Mediocre to the point of death, still complaining about heaven and earth, saying that I won't give myself a chance, I won't give myself a stage. Let's despise them together deeply. Okay, let's despise him together. The little idiot who was already asleep, Maria Anna, was woken up by the old war god's words. She didn't know anything, and she didn't wipe her saliva, so she followed her uncle's last sentence. Made everyone laugh. Even the Grand Prix and the Grand Prize winner of the junior group, Franz Joseph, laughed heartily, not to mention little Karl, who went crazy for a while with his second brother Maximilian. Old Karl pinched Maria's fleshy little face, full of doting, and his eyebrows were raised, and the longevity eyebrows that went down were all poked into the eye lines, and they seemed to be unable to break free. Look!